Good evening, everyone. If we could, come off, get on camera. I welcome everyone to this RC chat. We have several special guests, and I'm Dr. Carla Debnam, the Executive Director of the Renaissance Center, and I'll be, moderating and hosting this chat. I wanted to give you a little bit of background information about why I thought this would be a good topic, about our history, knowing our history and knowing ourselves, because cultural identity, especially for African Americans and other minority groups, is important. It's important to their mental health. Why do I say that it's important to their mental health? It's because it has been studied, and several very smart people have concluded what we always knew anyway in different communities and populations, is that having an identity and a group that you are familiar with, grew up with, comfortable with, know about, helps you to develop self-esteem. You have a built-in support system. Also, you manage life differently when you know more about who you are, maybe who your family is, where they're from, or even if you don't know some of those things, because some of us don't have that kind of information, you get to establish your own cultural identity and history with other people that are like-minded. Even in our faith traditions, we can get close to people, and we use the terminology, especially in the Black church, that this is our church mother, our church father, we call each other brothers and sisters. So even if we don't have the kind of cultural history and knowledge about our particular family backgrounds, some of our faith traditions, of course, encourage us to be like a family. And so that's where our identity can be found as well, even within our faith community. The reason this is important is because it's been a rise in the last few years of a lot of violence in the community, a lot of self-harm, suicide is up amongst Black Americans and other minorities, but in particular, youth from 16 to 24. So it's great. I have two of our great youth on here, and they're going to introduce themselves. And also, this is important because some of our lived experiences now, and we'll have Dr. Jewell, we'll talk a little bit about that, is rooted in our history in this country. And therefore that adds to our stressors, and, knowing about why people act out and why they do what they do from a mental health or other community standpoint is, some of it's based in the struggle. But also, this is the good news, y'all. The good news is knowing and identifying with your people. I'm big on this. You got to find your people. Now, all our people don't look like us, so it's not necessarily that, but it's people you identify with that encourage you, that lift you up, that embrace you, that do things to again improve your mental well-being. It's a protective factor. It helps us to get through what we're going through when we know we're not alone on the journey. So whoever is listening, you're not alone on the journey. You have a unique personality, but you also belong to a group and a community that, if not, God will lead you to your group of community so that you won't be in this place, in this situation, this thing we call life, and feel alone. I'm going to let our guests introduce themselves. You all don't have to, give a lot. Just you can say your name and your name is already there. But if you want to say a little bit more to your name, you're welcome to do so. So we're going to start with Dr. Jewell, then Kayla, and then Tyrese.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jewell Debnam. I'm a historian and educator, and I think that's all. I'm also her daughter, so if that wasn't obvious. But I guess she's part of my people, so.
Hi, my name is Kayla Miller, and I'm a senior at Polytechnic Institute.
Hi everyone, I'm Tyrese Stanley, and I'm a senior at Baltimore Polytechnic Institute.
All right, so we have two great seniors on their way out of the door into the big world of higher education or employment. So, you'll be on that journey soon. So let's get started with some of our questions. And again, this is conversational. It's not there's no right or wrong. But how do you think? And I'll let Dr. Jewell start us off, and then followed by Tyrese, and then Kayla. Does Black history impact you or us today? So,
I think Black history is something that affects us, whether we know about it, know our history or not, every day, not only as Black American people, but as Americans, as our history is integral to the history of this country. And I think it's important to emphasize the entire story, so not necessarily only the good, uplifting parts, but the whole story is relevant to how we got here today. And I think it's important, as an educator, for me, it's important to provide or offer my students access to information that they could then use however they see fit. Some of it will be extremely relevant to their personal lives, and some of it won't be, or they might not think it is initially. But I think it's important to know where you've been. And especially for Black people who have had a really arduous journey in this country, that our connection to even the more difficult parts of history shouldn't be one of shame, but one of pride, that we have made it this far. And I think positive associations with your heritage and history can play a big role in how you see yourself, how you see community, and maybe how you treat people around you.
thanks. Kayla? Or did I say Tyrese? Kayla, then Tyrese.
Okay, to me, Black history has impacted me in many different ways. It has impacted the music I listen to, my style, whether it be what I have on or my hair, or just me in general, and also the things that I'm interested in. Knowing the history of our people and the lack of resources that we were given, I want to try my best to give back to my community and learn in as much as I can and take the opportunities that Black people in the past didn't have, in order to help uplift us and move us forward.
Black history has impacted me because it informed me about the hardships that my ancestors and people of our skin color went through, and the things like that they taught and did that aren't taught today, and that they hid from us so we don't know. And it also allows me to do things like play sports be able to play sports and go places I want, anywhere I want, and it gives me freedom.
I like that, Tyrese. It's giving you freedom. And this year's theme for Black History Month is Black resistance. And that resistance has resulted in the freedoms that we now have and will continue to resist, those things that try to hinder us and hurt us from being the people that, we were created to be. But that resistance, again, is in our DNA. No one, we wouldn't be where we are now if people didn't fight, if some of the more notables are like Harriet Tubman and Martin Luther King Jr. We have Coretta Scott King. These people all did what they could and resisted so that we could be here talking about this today. Dr. Jewell, do you have anything to add to the history theme this year of Black resistance?
You mean like what that means?
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
So Black resistance, the theme was every year, the Association for the Study of African American Life and History, which was initially founded by Carter G. Woodson more than 100 years ago, puts out a theme for Black History Month. In recent years, it's been Black health and the Black family. And this year it's Black resistance. And I suggest you go to their website actually to read their long thing. It's like 3 pages explaining why resistance is important in Black history. But I think sometimes when we hear the word resistance, we have immediate thoughts that might include slave revolts or the Black Power movement, or even Black Lives Matter protests. But resistance, importantly, was not only those sort of acts that may have included violence to some degree, like a revolt, for instance. But resistance could simply mean staying alive in a system that's meant to kill you. So that could mean people who were enslaved staying alive. Maybe they didn't participate in a grand slave revolt, but the sheer act of living and having descendants means that we are here. And in that way, they resisted the sort of death that came along with slavery, either of the body or of the spirit. And resistance to me then means not only fighting, but also staying alive. And we hear this, to Kayla's point, in our music, in our religious practices, in our and being and excelling at sports. When 100 years ago, maybe 110 years ago, when Jack Johnson was becoming really famous as a boxer, Black men weren't necessarily perceived as equal in physical capability to white men. And so in that space, it might seem, well, all you see in the NBA is Black men, for instance, and the NFL is dominated by Black men. But there was a time when that wouldn't have been an automatic place for Black people to succeed and excel. So to me, resistance is in everything we do. It's in our hair, it's in the clothes we wear, it's in going to places where we weren't welcome. I mean, that's obviously what people during the civil rights movement were doing often. But resisting anything in any way that is meant to bound and bind you to systems that are meant to exploit. So for me, resistance is just being, to some extent. So yeah.
That's great. And that's why this whole theme, know your history, know yourself, is important, because the mere fact that we're here today is evidence of our ancestors resisting, which is a good thing. So sometimes, again, the negative comes out, but as Dr. Jewell said, the mere fact that we can participate and do things, and even we're still fighting today. She mentioned hair. There's an act before Congress. I think they might have ratified it, called the Crown Act, so that we can wear our hair any way we want to work, to school. People are being put out of schools, not getting jobs because we have different ways of wearing our hair that, of course, affirm our culture and this is, an expression. So even wearing your hair the way you want is a form of resistance to those who feel threatened, by our individuality. So our next question is, what difference does it make if we know the history of our families? Because some of us don't know our family history, some of us do. And, does it make a difference to you if or to people if they know their family history? So I'm gonna start with Kayla, then Tyrese, then Dr. Jewell.
I think it can make a huge difference knowing our history. My dad oftentimes says that we can't move forward if we don't know where we came from. And I think that's something I really agree with a lot, because if we don't know the history of our family, then we aren't really sure of how to acknowledge all of the bad things or bad things that we went through or bad things that happened to us. And without that, we don't know how to move forward or how to fix situations or how to do something better. So I do think knowing your history can definitely help you move forward.
Right. Tyrese?
I think it is very important too, because the history of your family can tell you where you came from and how you got here, and it can inform you about like your ancestors, what they did and how they impacted you and where you are to that day. And it also can, on like the health side of it, it also can inform you of like a sickness on your bloodline or something that flows in your bloodline.
The first thing I thought about was health as well. That it's important to know your family history, because then you know what you might encounter or why you might be feeling a certain way if you know, hereditary illnesses, for instance. But I think family history is also important because you might be surprised by the things you learn or the things you hear from elders about family members who you never met, but stories are passed down or items are passed down. I thought also, besides health, of learning or kind of knowing that my great-grandparents and my grandparents were members of labor unions. But when I got more deeply into my research that I do, I learned that my grandmother had been a member of the same union that I studied. And that's not something that I would have necessarily talked to her about while she was alive, but it became really important to me once I learned that about her. So even things you learn after people are already gone can make you maybe feel a deeper connection to them or find more meaning in the things you already enjoy. When you find out, oh, your great grandfather also liked to make music or also play sports or whatever the case may be, it might bring you meaning and understanding about yourself.
Yeah, that's a great point. Again, back to how knowing your history can improve your own self-knowledge and the way you feel about yourself is the little things. It could be the color, maybe your family member's favorite color, and you share the same favorite color, and you just found that out. Or it could be even the way you wear your hair. It could be so many things. So one of the things that's interesting to me is people comment, about my hair color now that I've let it grow gray. But my grandmother's hair was this color, and so it's my aunt is like natural. It's a family thing to have this shade of gray. And so sometimes, you can look at something that's in your family background and feel discouraged by it or feel like it's negative, especially when we have backgrounds in our families of trauma, maybe substance use or violence or things we find out about people's past that we didn't know. And that can sometimes make us feel uncomfortable around others. But again, the fact that we're still here in spite of some of the things that our family members have gone through is a testimony to, again, our resilience, but also our resistance. And so some of the things in our families may not always be good, but it doesn't mean that our families are not good families. And so we have to look for the best. And again, you can find your people. So we know everybody's family, even if you try to find the best, there's some challenges there, but find your people especially as you get older, and even as younger people, it's never too late to find your people or too soon. And they don't have to necessarily be family. Again, you could have a church aunt or mother, people, your coach, the librarian, it could be different people the librarian is one of my favorite people. So it's just those kinds of things that can help direct your path as you go on. So knowing about yourself, knowing about your family history, also knowing about your family's mental health history. These are things we don't talk about, but usually some of these things run in families, whether it's anxiety, depression, substance or alcohol use or other addictions. Doesn't mean you're going to have it because other people have it in the family, but it's just good to know. So if you're, feeling a certain kind of way, you have somebody to talk to about it. You don't want it to get as bad as maybe as some of your family members. So knowing all about history is good. Next, how can you help others become more involved in learning about Black history or their own family history? And I want to let everyone know that if you have questions, you can put it in the chat. Make sure we get some questions from our viewers. So, Dr. Jewell, can you begin? How can you help others become more interested in knowing about themselves?
I don't know. I'm so interested in it. I've been interested in Black history, or was made to be interested in Black history from the way you all raised me. But I think it's important that people see history wherever they go, and that it's not like something that is exclusive to the classroom. Obviously, I teach in a classroom, but there are lots of other ways to encounter history, and I think that that's important. I'm a big fan of museums, and in Baltimore, we have a great one, the Reginald F. Lewis Museum of African American History, and there's also a Frederick Douglass Museum, and other smaller museums, because Maryland has a wealth of famous Black figures, including Harriet Tubman and Benjamin Banneker and just a lot of people. Also, notably, lots of important jazz figures from Baltimore as well. And so I think experiencing the history in that way can make it seem more real and tangible if you can see like evidence of people living and not just hearing about it in class. I'm also a big fan of documentaries as a way to like dip into history. And there are lots of really good ones that of course are running on TV right now because it's Black History Month. But I think engaging in ways outside of formal learning is really critical. Of course, you need to check your sources because everyone's not necessarily a good source, but books, a big fan of those. And you can almost find any book in any subject. So some people might say, I don't like history, but you like sports, or you like music, or you like visual or the fine and performing arts. And there are ways to access history and experiencing all of those things. So if you go to an Alvin Ailey performance, you're experiencing maybe new works in dance, but you're almost always going to see Revelations, which is a historic piece at this point. So anything that you enjoy has some historical element, and you can find connections to the things you enjoy. And I personally like engaging students with things they kind of like. So telling them they could explore sports history or music history are ways to engage students who may not think they're interested in history or may think history is boring. But there are lots of, history is everything, any subject you can find. So for me, I think it's important to just give people options. And everyone's not necessarily a deep reader, or you don't like documentaries, but you might like seeing things. And so going to museums might sort of fill the void for you. And of course, there's the Smithsonian in DC and other Black history museums around the country, really, and historic sites. So if you like to go do things, you can do things that combine like learning and like whatever activity you enjoy. So that's what I would offer, that go experience the things and don't sort of wait to be taught, because a lot of the learning I did related to Black history, I went to a New Psalmist Christian school, so it's Black, and we learned a lot of Black history. But a lot of my learning from 6th to 12th grade was self-directed, related to Black history, because I wasn't necessarily getting that at where I went to middle and high school, but I had already been interested. So I feel like I'm talking too much, but obviously this is my thing.
This is your thing. So look, the rest of us we're learning as you're sharing. So we appreciate that. That's some great tips. So how, Kayla, do you feel like you can get people, that you're talk with or share with to be interested in learning more about history or Black history?
I think Dr. Jewell brought up a great point of engaging in a non-formal manner and like learning about it without being in a classroom. So me personally, I am also like very interested in Black history. So it's a topic of discussion a lot of the time with me and my friends. And I think my passion of Black history and all of the things that I want to do to kind of make an impact on that may inspire other people to be interested in learning. Or if I talk about something that I read about or my mom told me about and bringing it up in conversation, not in a formal way and not in a history lesson, but I'm talking to my friends and we're having a conversation about it and we're having dialogue. So I think that's another way that we can be more involved in learning, or I can be more involved in learning Black history.
Tyrese?
I feel I can help my friends and inform others about Black history by like spreading information and like trying to help them where it like also benefits them with something like an activity they love to do. I can like encourage them to like learn the history of it and like how it started and where it came from. And also, a lot of things that we use today are from Black inventors. So like try to encourage them to like look up like how it was made, who made it, and the history of it.
Yeah, that's a good point. A lot of the things that we use every day have been thought or supported by, thought up by, or created by, or supported by the creativity of African Americans. One question from the audience, I'm going to say this might be for you, Jewell. Discuss the processes of finding out about your family history if biological family is not known or deceased.
Well, there are pros and cons to using like a DNA test to find your ancestors. If that is something you're interested in, there are plenty of DNA tests. Of course, you might want to read the disclaimers about what is done with your DNA after you give it. But anyway, that is a place to start. I would also say that if you have family that isn't biological, but you feel deeply connected to that family, that might be your path forward. That your found family is the family you explore, because even if you're not biologically related to them, if you are emotionally connected, that family history might be important to you. And if those people are known to you, there are lots of different avenues you could use. If you are from Maryland, the Maryland Historical Society could be a place to start. I will also say that the now available at the NMAAHC are Freedmen's Bureau records that might make it easier to go deeper into your family history. If you have names and you can get back to the period of Reconstruction when the Freedmen's Bureau was in existence, you might be able to make it back to the plantation with that information if you can go back that far. And usually you can find that information via the ancestries or the 23andMe's, and without having to give your DNA necessarily. But it is certainly a hard to do if you are looking to connect to your biological family and they aren't around for you. But if you have their information, that is a place to start. And names, possible locations where they lived, approximate ages at certain time periods. And all those sites really do, like Ancestry, is aggregate information from other sources, like the Freedmen's Bureau records and census data. So, and the census is accessible to anyone who wants to use it and go directly to census.gov. If you don't want to go that way, it definitely will take longer and it'll be harder. It might be easier just to put some names into the databases that already do these things, because it's possible and probably probable that you have a family member who's already started. And so you won't necessarily have to do that much work, even if you aren't aware that they're on these sites.
Yeah, I agree. I was thinking the same thing, a DNA test. But if you have any names, plug them in. This is what I've found, that somebody knows, it might be a cousin or a family friend, or my family teases me because I save obituaries, but obituaries are historical documents. I'm just putting it out there for you all. And so you can go through them and find names of people that you didn't even know you were necessarily related to. So say if it was, someone in the same, again, neighborhood, in this area, well, in our area, Baltimore, Maryland, and DC, people live in neighborhoods for years. And so someone from that neighborhood may know your deceased relative. Now, if you don't, so that's how you can find out, just by word of mouth, or the church or other organizations they may have belonged to, that you can get information from those organizations sometimes, or, look back through the records and just ask people if they knew, had they heard about your family member, if you have names. And that's the names help. The again, you could always do the DNA if you feel like you want to go that route. And I have done the ancestry.com. It's been really interesting. And a sidebar, Jewell mentioned the Freedmen's Bureau. So I was born at the Freedmen's Hospital, which is now the Howard University Hospital. But when I was born, it was called Freedmen's, but that was a part of that bureau that they set up after, you said Reconstruction, right? During Reconstruction, which was after the Emancipation Proclamation. So these are things that, like, wow, it's a big connection. For me, it was just the name of a hospital, but as I learned more about it, it was bigger than the name of a hospital. It was a part of our history in this country. And it was probably the only place I could be born, to be honest, at that time. So these are things that you can know. So you might know where the person was born, the city, the town, the state, the county. Those things help you to find out more about your family history as well. What have you learned about yourself as you have learned more about Black history and your cultural identity? We're going to start with Kayla, and then Jewell, and then Emma Tyrese.
It's kind of a hard question for me a little bit, because I think that learning more about my culture has taught me more about, like I said, it kind of helped me find my passion or things that I'm very interested in the future. It's something I struggle with a lot, but hearing the stories of the Black community and how Black people were treated, I kind of felt emotionally connected to that and felt that I wanted to be a part of that change. So I learned that about myself. I learned to accept a lot of the features that I have, such as dealing with my hair. I now have locks, so I'm trying to embrace that Black love in me and kind of really just connect with my roots and be in love with the things that I have because of my community. So I feel like I'm still learning, but thus far, those are some of the things that I have learned about myself.
Well, I love history, of course, but I think studying Black history has just affirmed my love of being Black more and more. There's always something to be proud of or surprised by or motivated by when I read new books, when I read books that I've read before. The history is affirming. And I guess it could provide a sense of place and a sense of self. And especially if you're not always in spaces that are affirming to you, sort of falling back on the fact that, you know, you have all these fabulous ancestors who paved the way can maybe feel like a sense of protection to some degree from the elements. But yeah, it just affirms my love of our people and community whenever I learn something new or whenever really I'm able to share our history with other people too.
I would say what I learned about myself is I learned like I can have an impact, just how my ancestors and the people who came before me and made changed it, and I can invest, and I can be able to make something new, do something different. And I also, it shows me like, it's like a push that makes me want to do good. Like I have people, role models, ancestors, people in my family who went to college, did good things, got their degree, even though they weren't, so their families before them didn't go to college, and it showed me like I can do it, and it made me want to like set milestones and be in the history like people like Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and those people were.
That's good, because it really is about what you take away from it. You know, we can always hear, and we do hear in the news and in the culture, American culture, about the negative portrayal of African Americans in particular and other minorities in the you just hear it every day. And so you have to have something to combat the barrage of negativity, even could be self-negativity, that sometimes people don't feel good about themselves because of the racial climate that we live in. And racism is a part of why persons are so stressed and under distress in this country because of that. And so that does impact their daily living and the ability to learn and thrive because of overcoming the struggles. So knowing the good things and focusing on those, as well as knowing the things that we've resisted to still be here, is I think is amazing. We do have a question from it's probably for me and you, Jewell. What do our young people have to do to carry on the importance of learning our heritage to the next generation? So what's their responsibility? How do they do it? We've already talked about some, just having conversations, being a role model, maybe. What do you think younger people can do?
I would say I'm not going to put it on the young people yet because they're still learning. And I think it really is a responsibility of people like me or people who are older than me to impart before expecting them to carry anything on. I think a lot starts at home. I think that we couldn't and shouldn't, unfortunately, rely on the education system to necessarily provide an adequate history of Black America. And so it's first important that they're exposed. You can't expect them to be able to share knowledge that they don't know. Of course, our friends on this call are very curious and like seeking the information, but everyone isn't. And of course, I'm sure they were motivated to learn Black history by someone or by a teacher or a family member. So I think it's important to just emphasize that knowing your history is knowing yourself and providing that from a very young age. And that can be in children's books, it can be in the places you take your children. So I think it's not only, it is important for the young people, put this in quotes because I still feel like I'm young, right? To carry on history. But I think it's primarily important that people who are parenting children are also doing that. And parenting can mean you have biological children. It can mean you are providing care for children in some other way, that you're doing that so they can then go and carry it on. Because it's not good to rely only on schools to do so. Obviously, I am an educator and do it in my classes, but everyone doesn't. So I think it's important to start at home and also to support the curriculums to know what's going on, go to your school board meetings, know what they're talking about and proposing that might have some impact on your children. And I think that is where it starts because they can't go with anything until they know and are exposed to it.
Yeah, I would agree. We're putting a lot of responsibility on the children for things that we haven't taught them. And, we have neglected in some ways to give them some of the foundation, not everybody, but they can't learn unless we teach them. And so it really is up to us to make sure they know and are aware. And that's the importance of, a lot of churches have historical, have been founded hundreds of years ago, even 7 years ago, but they have a history. Knowing the history of things you're interested in and what those former pastors or founding pastors had to do to create a church community and what they went through. And I think about our church, Morning Star, that when they had gotten enough money to get the church erected, but owed someone, and the people that they owed, vandalized the property before they could even open. So it's things just knowing the struggle, yet they still said we're going to have church anyway. And, here we are today. But those are some things that if you're interested in anything as an adult, what you pass it on to those around you. And it could be, again, about family. It doesn't have to be about people, far and wide. But some of our family members did attend the March on Washington. I mean, they may not talk about it, or maybe they didn't, maybe they watched. I know some of us were around with the riots after Dr. King was assassinated. We may have been little or even teens or preteens, but just being able to share that information to our young family members or those who have an ear to hear. Another thing, Dr. Jewell mentioned going to school board meetings. We need to go to parent-teacher meetings if we are expecting the schools to be that source of information. If not, it has to come from us. We have to, add it to our lifestyle. Black history has to be a lifestyle of teaching it and passing it on. One of the things that Jewell mentioned was do something you already enjoy and add history to it, right? So if we enjoy eating biscuits, y'all know we came up with that one. So who can I find the origins of the biscuit recipe, right? Macaroni and cheese, right? I can't think of what's the
James
Hemmings. Say his name again.
Hemmings.
James Hemmings, who was a descendant of.
He was the brother of Sally Hemings, enslaved by Thomas Jefferson.
Right. So he went away to France to learn culinary. Came back with his macaroni and cheese recipe that we all love. Everybody's changed it, but that even something as small as macaroni and cheese, that's what it seems small, but that's a part of our history that we created. So find that, and it's up to us adults. Okay, these must be the adults asking some really tough questions. Explain the arguments about critical race theory and the Black history studies in the school system.
I'll start by saying that critical race theory is not taught in K through 12 education in any direct manner. It might inform teachers' practices, but it is not like, that's something that's almost exclusively at the law school level. So when you hear someone saying CRT, they probably don't even know what that means. It's a theory partially created by Kimberly Crenshaw, who is a professor at UCLA and Columbia University and other professors. Regardless, it's not something that's taught in K through 12. And it is basically centered on the idea that the legal system, it's related to legal history and the idea that race has been written into the law in the United States, very loosely. This is not like the by the book definition. Now, the issues with how people have made CRT a sort of buzzword and a placeholder for anything that's even sort of close to being an accurate history of the United States is the issue. CRT is not. It's the idea that some communities don't want the actual truth to be told about the history of white supremacy in the United States, and have very smartly misused the term to excite the base. And we see what's happening in Virginia with regard to history standards, even the sort of temporary CRT hotline they had, making it seem like information that should be basic, maybe including a clear history of enslavement in the United States, would be transgressive. That's basically how they portray CRT, which is really a misnomer. Now, the issue with advanced placement African American studies, which I think was actually piloted at Poly last year, is a totally different matter. African American studies is a discipline that was founded during the Black Power era and first founded at San Francisco State College and spread across the United States, basically as a result of activism of undergraduate students across the country who were integrating predominantly white universities. Well, it happens at HBCUs too, but primarily integrating predominantly white universities where they didn't have intellectual spaces, cultural spaces that were safe and affirming and reflective of themselves. And so Black studies is a discipline that is meant to study Black people. Some places would call it Africana studies or African diaspora studies, or lots of different names for it, and ways to be more inclusive of the global Black experience. But the sort of backlash to it being possibly instituted in Florida, namely, is basically, I'm trying to say this really tactfully, y'all. It's basically another sort of CRT type issue. There are states across the country who already don't teach an accurate depiction of the United States history, especially with regard to the Black experience in the United States. And I believe the AP African American Studies curriculum was meant to affirm the discipline. Of course, advanced placement tests are optional. The classes are optional. Nobody will be compelled into taking the classes. It's by choice, and hopefully it does spread so people get a better, and maybe so Black students in predominantly white spaces even can get culturally affirming education. It might be information they're not learning in their United States history class, they're probably not learning. I was an African American studies major in college, so this is something very personal to me. But it is not, it's not what they're saying it is. And I would encourage you to question why people might not want an accurate narrative of the Black experience in the United States to be accessible, widely accessible to not only Black students, which is who we're primarily talking about here, but to all students. It could possibly do lots of good if everyone was exposed to Black history. Obviously, that's my focus, but anyway.
Yeah, I like that. That pretty much sums it up, that Black history is American history. And there is no way to kind of break that up. But because people wanted to have two Americas, you know, the double consciousness that we have to live under, that W.E.B. Du Bois had mentioned and wrote about, that you can't just be yourself. You have to be one way this place, the other another way in another place. And part of that is just how we've learned to resist and to survive. And some of our survival skills have gotten us here. And people, you know, don't want to know their role in it or their ancestors' roles. It's not that they had a direct role. Some people did. But these are the things that, again, great questions. As adults, it's our job to get good sources, like Jewell mentioned. You always have to get good sources, because not everything we read in social media, no matter what platform it's on, TikTok, whatever it is not, I don't care what the people call themselves, that you need to check people out before believing some of what we hear, whether it's mental health advice or historical facts. So these are things that we should, even our faith, we have to dig deep, saints. You can't believe everything because people are saying they're preachers or whatever they may say they are. We have to do our own research and know the truth. Then the truth will set you free. That's what we're doing here tonight. We want everyone here to know the truth of their story and why your story is important to your mental health. Because if you don't know why it's great to be Black, how can you explain that to someone else? Or maybe you're listening to us and you're not African American, you're from another culture. You need to embrace who you are and your identity and be proud of your background, no matter what it is, so that you can maintain good and healthy mental well-being. It's very important for you to find your people. Your people may be in your ethnic and racial group, they may not be, but it's a part of your social development, your mental development, your spiritual development, and it really does make a difference. The more we know about ourselves, the more we can be mentally settled and stable. A lot of people are unsettled and unstable because they are searching, and the search is sometimes just within, but they haven't even settled within themselves. So, any final remarks from anyone else on the here? So we're out of time, everyone. Thanks for your patience. Again, if you want to, you want to shoot me information about topics that you want us to cover, let me know. You can call us at 410-409-0025 if you're interested in counseling, or again, you want to give me some information about topics you would like us to discuss. I welcome any suggestions. Of course, this is for you to learn more about yourself, to learn more about mental health and how we can overcome these issues together. There is a place for you. Find your people, embrace your culture, and be proud of how God has created and made you in his image. And everything God created, he said, this is good.